Chapter 2. Mama said there'd be days like this. Matt was not particularly a fan of math, but lately he seemed to have grasped the handle in Trig 1. He had just solved the do noun the teacher had put on the board and was feeling quite proud of himself when he felt someone tapping his shoulder. The little Indian guy that sat next to him was tapping him and pointing to the door as discreetly as possible so as not to alert the teacher. When Matt looked at the door, he saw Danny smiling at him and beckoning for him to come outside. When he shook his head no, she clasped her hands together and silently pleaded with him to come outside of the classroom. "What's the matter?" he mouthed to her, wondering what she could want that was so important it couldn't wait until after the bell. "Please," she mouthed back with a desperate look on her face. Matt was a by-the-book kind of guy who didn't believe in cutting class, missing homework, and sneaking around. He prided himself on his spotless reputation of being a stellar student and was annoyed that Danny wanted him to leave his class right in the middle of a subject that was giving him trouble. He looked at her as she stood in the doorway, out of the line of the teacher's eye, pleading for him to come to her. This had better be important, he thought, as he raised his hand and asked his teacher if he could go to the bathroom. Granted permission, Matt slowly made his way to the door as his classmates made quiet little noises, knowing that Danny was waiting for him outside. "What's wrong?" he asked with a bit of irritation after they had moved away from the classroom and away from the eyes of his friends and the teacher. They were standing in the stairway, so no passing security officer could see them. "Nothing is wrong, silly. I just wanted to see you and tell you that I missed you." "Danny, you could have told me that later. I don't like leaving class for silly things. I'll see you later." "Wait, Matt. There was something else I wanted to tell you." "Come on, Danny. I'm not cool with this. I gotta go." "Matt, will you listen to me for 1 minute and I promise I won't bother you like this again?" "Okay, go ahead, but hurry up." "Well, ever since I have been going to your church, I don't look at things the same way and I started wanting to be a better person." "That's good news, Danny," he said now that she had his full attention. "And that's not all. This morning before I left the house, for the first time, I prayed and I feel like a new person," she said, taking a small step closer to Matt. "Danny, that's the best news I've heard in a long time. Now I understand why you couldn't wait, and I'm glad you wanted to share this with me. Did you tell Cherie?" "No, not yet. I wanted to tell you first. I'll tell her when I see her later. I remembered what the teacher said last Sunday, and I asked God to watch over me as I started my day, and I thanked Him for His blessing. I feel so happy inside," she said as she wrapped her arms around his waist and looked up into his handsome face. They were standing on the same step, and neither one of them spoke for a moment as they looked into each other's eyes. Matt had never had a girlfriend, although he knew lots of girls. He was on the basketball team, good looking and very popular. The opportunity to have any girl he wanted was his for the taking. But he was a Christian, and he took that very seriously. His devotion to God sometimes was a sore point to his many friends who at times called him crazy for not taking advantage of all the booty that was being offered to him. Some of his close friends had even asked him if he was gay, since they had never heard him talk about any female experiences. His denial to the gay rumors and affirmations of his faith then caused him to be called crazy. He didn't much care what others thought of him since he was dedicated to God and strong in his faith. He was quick to tell everyone that he was a Christian, but what everyone didn't know was that he was struggling with his flesh. He was always praying silently for God to give him strength. The tight jeans, short skirts, and belly shirts made it a constant battle to keep his attention on his books. All the girls that were determined to get his attention would stop at nothing in their quest to possess and be possessed by him. Sometimes the very smell of them seemed to drive him crazy. They would sit across from him wearing short, tight skirts and cross their legs. They would stand in front of him wearing skin-tight pants and bend over. They would sit in front of him and lean over, exposing the top of their panty or thong line. They would brush up against him as they reached for things behind him. They would slip notes in his book and ask for his number and email address. And the really brazen ones, like his sister's friend, Crazy Jazz, would just come right up to him and plop down on his lap. Yeah, he had his hands full, but he was happy to report he had managed to keep them all at arm's length, all without offending him. There were a few that were harder to turn away than others, and it was these that made him wonder if he was really doing the right thing. You're only human, you know, and you're only young once. If you don't take advantage of this, you may never get a chance at it again, urged the voice of temptation on more than one occasion. But he always saw the girls for what they were, thrill seekers and sinners. There were a few that actually made him think twice and even 3 times about getting involved. But when he invited them to church, they always either laughed or made flimsy excuses not to attend. There was one thing that made a world of difference with Matt. If he was going to get involved with a girl, she had to be a Christian. If she didn't want to have time for God, he wouldn't have time for her. When he first met Danny, he had no interest in her at all. She was a very pretty girl, but she had a reputation, and she didn't get along with his sisters. She was loud, fast, and he was sure she would be pregnant before she graduated. When she started showing interest in him, he was a little flattered and very surprised. She usually went for the rough, bling-bling wearing, tattooed, pants hanging off the butt type. She and her bosom buddy Cherie made it a point to try cuddling up to Matt and Rife, much to his sister's disapproval, but he dismissed them as soon as they were out of sight. However, the situation took on a slightly different outlook when they started showing up at his church. They came every Sunday and even on some Bible study nights. They asked questions and were polite to his mother. He didn't know what had caused the change, but he didn't feel it was his place to call someone a hypocrite, like his outspoken sisters, when they so obviously were trying to turn their lives around. He had his mother's optimism when it came to giving someone the benefit of the doubt. Who was he to say she wasn't sincere? Who would go to such great lengths to get next to someone that they would go to church every Sunday and through the week? He noticed that she even stopped hanging out with all of her old friends just to be with him. He didn't care what his sisters said. She was sincere, and he was glad to finally meet someone that cared enough about him and their own soul to make him care. Now that he had someone to spend time with, he was faced with the problem temptation. He was spending time with this hot young thing, and his body was in constant turmoil. He had not even kissed a girl, and here he was in a deserted stairway with one of the finest girls in the school pressed closely to him. She was looking up at him with innocent, hungry eyes. Her moist mouth was slightly parted, and there was no question she was waiting for him to close the distance between them. The fire that was racing through his loins was rocketing to his brain, scrambling all of his common sense and reason. That small voice that he always listened to sounded far, far away, and soon was silenced as it was replaced by another voice that told him this was going to be his first kiss and he had better not mess it up. The silence stretched on as the two young people continued to look into each other's eyes. Matt looked around to make sure they weren't being watched, and when he was sure they were alone, he wrapped his arms around Danny's waist and drew her closer to him. She stood up on her tiptoes as she lifted her head to meet his full, inviting lips. Deciding to throw caution to the wind, Matt closed his eyes and leaned down towards the waiting lips of his sister's arch enemy. Just before their lips met, Matt caught a whiff of Danny's breath, which smelled and tasted like peppermint gum. He felt fireworks exploding in his brain as Danny pushed her tongue into his mouth. Never in all his life had he felt anything like what he was feeling at this moment. Oh my God. If I knew kissing would be this good, I would have done it a long time ago, he thought, as he pushed his tongue into the mouth of the hungry young woman who moaned softly as she pulled him closer. So engrossed in their little makeout session were the two young people that they didn't hear the door open and the footsteps drawing closer and closer and stopped directly in front of them. "Well, go get a room, why don't you?" said the security officer, startling the couple and causing them to jump away from each other with guilty looks on their faces. Danny, wearing a smirk, covered her mouth with her hand while Matt hung his head in shame, neither one saying a word. Terry was the head security officer at the school and knew the Jones children quite well. She and the other staff of officers admired them and the respect they had for themselves and their mother. She herself had met their mother on several occasions when she had come to the various PTA meetings and the sporting events. She was a delightful woman who tolerated nothing but the best from her children and usually got it. There had been a couple of times when she had been summoned to the school for her youngest daughter, Lynette, but never for the two oldest ones. Terry was one of the few adults in the school that could tell the twins apart, and she also was one of the few adults that treated the young people in the school with respect. She never talked down to them or cursed at them, and they in return always respected her. Well, most of them. There were always the exception, and this little tart was definitely in the latter category. As much as Terry liked the Jones children, she equally disliked Danielle. She was arrogant, selfish, disrespectful, promiscuous, and ignorant. She had found her and various young men in more compromising situations than she cared to remember and was very surprised to see her and Matt here together. She wished she could give in to her basic urges and slap the little heifer without losing her job. but knew that was out of the question. She had warned Danny that if she caught her in the halls one more time, she was going to have her suspended, and she fully intended to keep her word. It was unfortunate for Matt that he had gotten caught up in Danny's little web of seduction, because that meant that he was going to have to be suspended as well. Okay, you two, you know what you're doing is a violation of school rules, and your parents are going to have to be called, and you're going to be suspended, right? Oh man, I can't believe this is happening, said Matt as he hung his head in shame and slumped against the wall. I don't believe this is happening to you either, Mr. Jones, said Terry as she gently nudged him to the direction of the dean's office. Back to your same old tricks again, I see, huh, Danny? Whatever. This is Matt's first offense, but as for you, well, I think some time at home will do you some good. At least some of the boys in school would get a breather from your trifling ways. You know what? I don't care what you say, Terry. Watch your tone, little girl. I'm not the one. Oh, what are you going to do? You can't do nothing to me but report me. And if I get suspended, he better get suspended too. I wasn't the only one in that hallway, and I wasn't kissing myself. You can't show no favoritism. He is not the one with the reputation for making out in hallways and stairways you are. So, reputation or not, he still was. So he should get suspended too. Danny, what are you doing? Asked Matt with a look of disgust mixed with hurt on his handsome face. What? You sound like you want me to get suspended. And you act like you don't care if I get suspended, she shot back. I care. I care if we both get suspended, but you sound like you're trying to get me suspended. Whatever. What is that supposed to mean? It means she was trying to get you suspended, Mr. Jones. Looks like you got caught up in one of Danny's little games, interjected Terry while giving Danny an evil look out of the corner of her eye.